So the market has decided that women and people who give birth deserve less time with their children than a dog.
During a House committee hearing, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez discussed some important points about the need for paid parental leave, including for men. And then she went on a tear comparing what dogs get in terms of what they're recommended when they give birth, comparing that to what humans get with paid parental leave in the U.S. So this discussion comes on the heels of 2 million federal workers being poised to get paid parental leave for the first time ever. This new policy is far from comprehensive, but it does mark a major milestone in expanding access to paid leave. That headline from Vox. Now, this paid parental leave, again, is only for government workers, and it's being folded into a defense spending bill. You have a Democratic House, and the only time they can bring this up, or the only time they choose to bring this up, is within a defense spending bill, as opposed to having a separate vote and then, going after Republicans for voting against it, assuming they would in the Senate. Anyways, it's a whole other discussion. Let's get to a couple clips here from this House committee hearing. This first clip is AOC discussing how, first she discusses how she provides paid family leave for her staff, including for men. And then she goes on here to discuss their experiences with paid leave.
From my staffer, Marcus, he said, as I write this today, I am currently home with my oldest son, while my partner visits family in Ohio with our youngest son. This might seem an inconsequential detail, but if I was not able to take this time off from work and be fully paid, my partner would not have been able to travel. And from my chief of staff, when asked about does giving dads less paid parental leave than moms contributes to the pay gap, when asked about that, she said, my thought is this. There is this often explicit but sometimes tacit assumption that child rearing is the job of the mother. But child rearing is the job of the humans that have collectively decided to have that child. When you have an institutional setup when you have institutional setups that reify that say, oh, actually dads don't need as much time because it's not their job to child rear, it's problematic. It creates expectations for employers who presuppose if I hire a woman in a certain age range, she might leave, but if I hire a man in that same age range, he would not. Ms. Chabot, can you illuminate a little bit on the impact of paid family leave for men and on folks, the positive impacts that could have on people who give birth?
Absolutely. And the sentiments that your staffers have articulated actually came up really poignantly last week on a panel that I moderated at New America on the release of our Men in Care report, Men in Paid Leave specifically. There were 3 dads who talked about the cultural expectations that dads wouldn't take leave. They were able to negotiate, to cobble together. One of them had a wife who had a horrible labor and a baby that was in the NICU, and he was back to work within a week. Unknowing, sort of talked about how even in the childbirth classes and Lamaze and all of the other things he did, there was never a discussion from the hospital system or from his employer or from any of the other men in his life about the importance of men taking leave. So policy is a precondition. We have to design policies that have wage replacement that's high enough that men can afford to take leave. We also need a culture and sort of a discussion and men standing up to say, leave taking is important to me, and here's the way that it allowed me not just to bond with my child, but also to support my partner.
Thank you, Ms. Chabot.
All right, so some fantastic points there. I just want to touch on the point that Ms. Chabot ended on there, where there needs to be a cultural shift and this understanding that men should also be taking parental leave, and there needs to be a discussion about that. Public policy is often what dictates culture. So when you change public policy, that in turn ends up changing how, men or other people feel about the issue of paid parental leave. And I'll give you an example of that, a perfect example of that from Iceland here in a minute. But first, so just to make some points here, look, I'm not a dad. I don't know if I ever want to be a dad, but there is parental leave for both parents, regardless if they're, a man and a woman, two women, 2 men, is incredibly important. So AOC, quoting her chief of staff here, I think makes an incredible point, saying, quote, child rearing is the job of the humans that have decided to collectively have that child. So it's not, child rearing isn't just the job of the person that, has the kid. It's the job of both parents collectively deciding how to raise that child, and they should both be taking equal part in that. And that's also to the benefit of the child itself. So another point here that is so important to make when discussing paid parental leave, how it affects the hiring process. So think if you're running a business and you know that there's a better chance that, a young woman's going to have a child, then you're less likely to hire, a woman in their 20s and their 30s than you are to hire a man of that same age range. Because you think there's a better chance that young woman may have a child, she may leave for parental leave, so I'm going to hire a man instead. So when you guarantee both parents parental leave, mandatory parental leave, as in you use it or you lose it, what ends up happening is you equalize the hiring process. So no longer are employers looking at the gender when it comes to hiring, because they know whether it's a man or woman or whatever, that regardless of who it is, both of them may have a child and decide to take parental leave and raise that child. So this affects the hiring process. So there should always be an equal. This issue should always be looked at equally when it comes to gender. Now, let me go to Iceland here. So I was discussing earlier how there should be mandatory leave, and how that is what shifts the culture, how public policy is what shifts culture. Iceland is a great example here. So in 2000, Iceland decided to institute paid parental leave, and it's 9 months paid parental leave for both parents. And it's divided up in, the man takes 3 months mandatory, use it or lose it. The woman takes 3 months mandatory, and then the last 3 months are divided up however they want to divide it up. So let me discuss how this impacted Iceland. So World Health Organization research shows that Icelandic daddies enjoy the strongest position as fathers in the world. The organization asked how easy it is for the child to go to its father with a problem. Compared to earlier generations, today's Icelandic children answer to a much larger degree that it is easy to discuss problems with daddy. Icelandic mothers have always enjoyed a strong position, according to the World Health Organization. The father's improved position has not impacted negatively on mothers, even though the father's opportunities have increased many times over. So, just based on this alone, the fact that kids are more comfortable with both parents equally, and that it hasn't negatively impacted the mom, and it's only positively impacted the father and the ability to raise that child and for that child to feel closer to their father. Huge benefit right here. And so going on to the issue of culture and how now parental leave is viewed in the U.S., in Iceland by men in the country. One of the PhD students at the University of Iceland interviewed young Icelandic men about masculinity and femininity. Ingolfur, who is a university researcher, found it interesting that the young men who were not yet fathers talked about parental leave and childcare participation as being a natural part of masculinity. So, if you ask men in the U.S., most men are not going to say that parental leave and childcare participation is part of masculinity. But because Icelandic policy back in 2000 dictated that fathers should take at least 3 months off to spend time with their child as they're raising it, it has now become part of the culture. It's become the norm to raise your child. It's become expected and is a part of being a man in Iceland. So this is one of many examples of how public policy dictates what the culture is, and in turn, that culture obviously has an impact in various ways. In this case, the impact is on raising children. Now, let me get to the next clip here. This is AOC kind of going on a bit of a tear, but a kind one, against Rachel Gressler here. So Rachel Gressler is part of the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative organization. And you'll see this exchange, and AOC makes the comparison of parental leave that dogs are expected to have compared to what humans have.
Ms. Gressler, you said earlier that you don't believe in a minimum wage. Is that correct? You believe the market should decide?
I don't think that we should take a job opportunity away from somebody if they're willing to work at a particular wage that the government is not allowing them
So
to.
no, you don't believe in a minimum wage. I take it you don't believe in health care as a right either. Is that correct?
I believe that we should help provide access to health care.
Okay. Do you believe employers should offer health care to every employee that they have?
I think that as part of a benefits package, they should determine what is the best way and what do the workers
Okay.
want.
So no, you don't believe it should be uniformly offered.
I think it should be
as a
what
right.
workers want and what employers are
Okay,
able
so
to
the
provide.
answer is no. And similarly, your view on parental leave is to let the market decide. And I think what we've seen here is that the market has decided. Ms. Szabo, 80% of families don't have access and workers don't have access to paid parental leave, correct?
Paid family leave. So
Paid family
care for a
leave.
child or a seriously family member, about a half of moms don't have access
So
to
the
paid
market's
leave.
decided. And what is the most common length of parental or paid family leave that you have seen?
In general, it's like 6 to 8 weeks, but it really
6
depends, and there's not a great there's not a great sample that tells us.
6 weeks. Do we know how long puppies are allowed to stay with their mothers after a dog has given birth?
I don't.
8 weeks.
Wow.
So the market has decided that women and people who give birth deserve less time with their children than a dog. And I think that at its core, has shown that the market has failed to treat people with dignity and with basic respect. And so when that happens, I think it's our job as the public to redefine the rules of society and to treat people who give birth with the dignity that they deserve. Thank you very much.
So there you go. This is a failure of the market. I mean, this idea that, let the market decide on healthcare. Well, it has, and 45,000 people a year die due to a lack access of healthcare in America. 500,000 families a year go bankrupt due to healthcare costs. That's what the market has now decided. So the market has failed, and that's just on healthcare. Paid family or parental leave. The market has decided that dogs should stay with their puppies longer than humans should stay with their kids. The market has decided, and the market has failed. As AOC says, that's why it's now the public's job to come in and decide the rules of society. The public is represented by a democratically elected government. So, you always hear conservatives talk about, I don't want the government in my life. The government is democratically elected. A private company is not. A private company doesn't have to answer to you at all. The government does. So that's why it is the government's job, the public's job, to dictate the rules of society, especially in cases where the market has already failed them. Now, one last piece here. I just want to say how much of an effective communicator Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is. Because this clip likely wouldn't have really made any headlines or nobody discussing it at all if she didn't make the point about the dog. Because this is she understands not only what needs to be done, but how to effectively communicate it so that the message gets out there and that people can easily understand it for themselves. I mean, if every politician had this skill, the ability to not only, not be bought by special interests, because, AOC she only campaigns with small individual donations, with volunteers, grassroots support, has no private fundraisers, takes no corporate money. So if every politician not only did that, but on top of that, we're also able to communicate the way that she's able to communicate, able to connect these issues so that people can easily understand them. I mean, you would have a completely transformed government, and every single person in government would be working for the people, which again, it gets back to the issue of, yes, the public absolutely is, or the government is democratically elected, is a democratically elected government. But when you have all this corporate money, all this private money pouring into these campaigns, well, that spoils the whole process. So you change how that works, or you have candidates or politicians like AOC, like Bernie Sanders, who completely cut themselves off from those special interest donors, all that money. Then you actually begin to have a more representative government than you had before.